Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Increasing Your Visibility, Effective Strategies for Reaching the Public, Decision Makers in the Media. I'm Felicia Kelly, Project and Evaluation Director at California Humanities. And if I'm not visible to you, just a quick description. I'm an older white woman with short brown hair, brown eyes, and today I'm wearing glasses and a print top. If you aren't already familiar with us, California Humanities is a statewide nonprofit organization and an independent nonprofit partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. For over 45 years, we've been supporting programs and projects through grants and partnerships that have made the humanities more relevant, accessible, and engaging to Californians of all backgrounds and walks of life. We're delighted to have you join us for the sixth offering of our Tools of the Trade series of free online learning sessions that have been conducted over the past 2 years to help our field build and rebuild capacity for public programming in the wake of the pandemic. In this session, we'll tackle the all-important subject of raising your visibility with a variety of audiences and stakeholders, drawing on the insights of some of our most experienced project directors in a conversation moderated by our interim communications director, Christy Shortridge. Christy is a very experienced communications and advocacy consultant who works with many state humanities councils across the country. She has years of experience with the entire spectrum of communications related work and has worn various hats throughout her career, including communications director, digital media specialist, blogger, legislative and advocacy specialist, congressional legislative assistant and press secretary, writer, graphic designer, and special event planner. Christy has received many accolades for her work, including 2 national awards in 2021 for projects she developed with the Nevada and Minnesota State Humanities Councils. We're delighted that she can be with us today. So over to you, Christy.
Thank you so much, Felicia. I am so happy to be here tonight with everyone. As Felicia said, I'm currently the interim communications director at California Humanities. And if you can't visibly see me, I am a middle-aged white woman with shortish blonde hair cut into a bob. I'm wearing a print colored blouse, and behind me are my bright pink walls with lots of artwork and a collection of brass on the piano. I'm moderating the panel this afternoon, and I would like to briefly introduce our guest panelists. To start off, we have Holly Alonso. Holly has served as the executive director of the Peralta Hacienda Historical Park in Oakland for the past 22 years. She developed Faces of Fruitvale, which is an exhibit consisting of first-person photo panels and audio interviews with a diverse community of Fruitvale. The historic site won the National Museum Medal in 2017 for its outstanding contribution to the community. Next, I'd like to welcome Philip Chung. Philip is the project advisor for the Japanese American National Museum's Little Tokyo Drift exhibition. This covers the history of the Japanese American car scene in Southern California from the 1930s up until today. Philip works as a producer, a writer, and a creative director at companies including Lodestone Theatre Ensemble, Netflix, and HBO Max. Next, we have Karina Huerta. Karina is the Youth Services Librarian at the Sunnyvale Public Library. Karina was awarded the Library Innovation Lab grant in 2019. This is a California Humanities project that helped her develop, the Marigold series. This is a series of events that intertwine the Latinx and Southern Asian communities of cultures of Sunnyvale, California. Next, we have Drew Oberjerky. Drew is the director of the Riverside Art Museum and project director of War Comes Home, a series that brought communities together with veterans and their families, writers and historians for their thoughtful reflections and lively discussion in the aftermath of war. She has led the establishment of the Cheech Marin Center for Chicano Art and Culture of the Riverside Art Museum. Welcome to all the panelists today. We are very happy to have you with us. I'm sorry, it's allergies. I'm in Texas, so there's something in the air today. I'm the interim communications director at California Humanities, but I also own my own consulting company called Christiana Shortridge Consulting. As Felicia said, I have a wide range of experience that has extended over the past 30 years and across the country, going all the way back to the 1990s as well. In all of my different types of communications related jobs, from being a congressional liaison to working on Capitol Hill as a press secretary, to owning my own graphic design company and having my own blog, to finally landing in the humanities world in 2015 or 2012 at the Minnesota Humanities Center. All of this has the foundation of building communications relationships based on clear, concise, and consistent communications. Building and maintaining relationships is such an important part of communications, and that's something that we're going to talk about today. These elements are so important, and that's an important part of our focus tonight in increasing your visibility and reaching your public audiences, decision makers, and the media. One of the biggest challenges facing our grantees, like our panelists today, is garnering attention, getting the right kind of attention, getting visibility and recognition for your work. Today's conversation will explore ideas and strategies to help gain positive exposure and attention to your projects and events. One of the first steps in increasing your visibility is identifying your audience and who you want to reach out to. That often seems, either it seems really simple or else it seems kind of like a daunting thing to do. Regardless, it's something that you have to plan ahead for and not start within 2 weeks of your event, which sometimes you have to do and do things on the fly. We've all done that before, but ideally you want to plan that at least a month ahead. And there's a few tips that I've kind of discovered over the past few decades of doing this kind of work. The most important thing is to reach out to your own networks and invite people that you know to come to your events and ask them to invite their friends and people who they think would be interested in attending your event. You could also send out, excuse me one second. If you have the availability and the means, sending out a press release ahead of your event is a really good idea. It can be as simple as Googling your local reporters, looking on Twitter, which is a great place to follow reporters, or if you have a larger budget, or if you have a board member or someone who's willing to help you, using a service like Prowly or something like that. You can place on-air messages on your local public radio stations. Back in the day, these were known as PSAs. Social media, that seems to be the place where it's at. You can post social media posts very easily yourself and ask people in your networks or people who are part of your event or program to like and share those posts on social media. Others in return will reciprocate. You can also try something completely different. And even if it's sort of out of your comfort, it's really not that hard to figure out how to do a Facebook live stream or an Instagram story. Something like that is very simple. It's a different way to share news about your upcoming event or program. You can send out direct emails to those who are involved in your project. That's pretty easy. Just look in your address book or your contact list and pull together a list. Inform your legislators. This can go as high up as your congressional delegation down to your local legislators or people in your local community. Send out e-blasts if you have that capability. Work with your partners and interest groups and stakeholders. They have their own networks that they can reach out to. Add your program or event to online calendars. That's a very simple way to spread the word about your event. create a simple flyer and post it in places where people will notice it. Even creating a simple information card or little table tent that you can set out with information about your organization or your project is a really effective way to get noticed. At your event or program, post a simple, poster or just even your flyer that talks about, this is how I can connect with you. It can have little icons and a list of your social media handles and your website. And most importantly, put your board or your advisory committee to work for you. That's what they're there for. They have their own connections and their own networks that they can help. And you can even build a simple toolkit that you can share with them that has sample emails to send out, some images of your event, and a really short, snappy little social media message that they can share. Again, these are just some simple resources and tips that you can toss out there to share information about your event. But now I would just like to pull our panelists into this conversation to get some ideas about what has worked well for them in the past. To start off with, Drew, I'm going to check in with you first. Looking back at your communications, what is your level of experience and expertise with communications work?
Yeah, so I'm a generalist, a public administrator specializing in nonprofits. I've had the wonderful opportunity to work alongside really talented trustees, artists, curators, and media and advocacy professionals, and I've learned a lot. I think, like so many people on this call who are in nonprofits and the arts, we learn by doing. My first job working at a museum in 2001, in the interview, could you design a website for us? Sure, I don't know how to, but I'll figure it out, right? So I've learned a lot by trial and error. I resonate a lot with what you had shared with some of those marketing strategies. I definitely think for us that what's worked really well is leveraging relationships of trustees, artists, curators, and stakeholders to help outreach to those and invite them. They know what that spark is that will excite, the media or perhaps an elected official to come to your event. So yeah, I definitely resonate with outreaching to your board and other stakeholders to have them connect in addition to you.
Great, thank you so much, Drew. Holly, how about you? What is your level of experience with communications and some different things that have worked for you in the past for communications outreach?
Well, museums are really all about the art of communication. And I should say we, and I know that our marketing director, Miguel Lopez, is on this call. And I owe a lot. I've learned so much from him, and I owe a lot to him. And I also wanted to say that what Drew, her list kind of covers almost everything. So thank you, Drew. That was great to hear. We've been working 20 years to connect history to community. And you think, whoa, that's hard. But we really started with an exhibit called Faces of Fruitvale, as I said, and as Drew said, as Krista said in the introduction, that sent the message that history is about you, the community. It's not just about the Peralta family, which our site has in its name. It's called Peralta Hacienda, but really history is about all of us. And so I think that brings me to my main point, that outreach is so much about the projects that you invent to connect to your public. Relevance is something that chases museums. How can we be relevant? And I just think that there are so many ways that we've done, and one of the main ways is through connecting and working with community cultures about their own stories. So I think that's just a major issue.
Great.
And so is that my minute?
Yes, we've got lots of
All
other
right,
questions on the docket. I'll come back to you though.
Okay, you said to relate it to our the project we wanted to focus on, so I hadn't done that yet, but I'll do that later.
Okay, we'll get back to you, Holly. I'm going to turn it over to Philip. Philip, what is your level of expertise and experience with communications work as related to your project?
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm still learning, so I'm by no means an expert, but I started, you mentioned Lodestone, and that was an Asian American theater company that we started like right out of college. And, it's learning everything by on the fly, right? Doing 10 years of that. And, I don't want to repeat a lot of what other people said, but I think all of that is valid. And so coming to this project, one of the things I learned from that experience was really the importance of partnering or kind of, connecting with others in the community that are doing the same thing, that have the same goals. And so for this project, the Little Tokyo Drift, which there'll be a larger exhibition that opens at the Japanese American National Museum in 2025, but we did the panel last year from the grant to kind of kick it off. And the idea was to partner with JANM, with the museum, but also the Nisei Week Festival, which takes place every year in Los Angeles. It's a big event that takes place in Little Tokyo, where tens of thousands of people come out. And so we really wanted to tie in specifically, not just to have the event during Nisei Week, but also make the panel that we were kicking this whole thing off with be about Nisei Week, because there was a whole car culture aspect of it that went away for many reasons. And then, we could talk about it more later, but obviously last year, Nisei Week got canceled because of COVID, and that created other issues that we had to deal with. But, we'll get into that later.
That is my next question. So we'll get into that next. But first of all, Karina, could you talk a little bit about your communications expertise and how it relates to your project?
Yeah, so I'm Karina, and I'm a female in her 30s with shoulder-length black straight hair, wearing a pink top and a black cardigan. I'm currently sitting in a conference room with a whiteboard behind me. So my level of communication work is, I would say it's minimal. The city of Sunnyvale, we do have a whole communications team who takes care of social media. Everyone has a role. And my role when it comes down to, reaching out to and promoting our programs is down to flyers, promotional slides, and what you mentioned, creating a calendar event and sharing that with community members and our stakeholders. So for this project in particular, the Marigold series, I followed one of the biggest advice from our communication team, and is to have flyers that are clear and straight to the point. And also I partnered with quite a few organizations. And so I made sure that we all had the same flyer, because sometimes each partner wants to create their own and kind of creates a confusion. So I think that really worked for us, having one flyer and distribute the one flyer all throughout.
Consistency, absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm going to just circle back with Philip really quickly about, you touched on COVID, and that is something that we all have had to deal with and kind of pivot to in the middle of our programming in 2020. What kind of challenges came up for you, Philip? And I'll pose this to everyone too. And how did you meet the challenges that COVID threw into your programming, and also with your outreach to your audiences?
Yeah, and I guess I'll do my description as well. I'm a Korean American male, middle-aged, buzz cut. I'm wearing a green shirt, and I'm sitting in my living room at the moment. So we originally got the grant to do a panel where we would invite individuals who are part of the Japanese American car scene during Nisei Week in the 70s and 80s. For 2020, right? So August 2020 was when we were going to present the event. COVID obviously happened. So the California Humanities was very kind enough to let us extend our kind of time period. So then we were going to do it for next year. And so this was like right when we had the vaccines and everything, and everyone was very positive. And this was going to be the museum's first live event, back from COVID. Nisei Week was going to come back live. And for those who don't know, it's tens of thousands of people in Little Tokyo, where the museum is. So we felt really good about it. And then Omicron hit at the literally the last minute. And so the museum shut down again. Nisei Week decided we're not going to do a live event. They were just going to do a few things, virtually. And so it was definitely difficult in that sense. And then even like literally down to the week before, I think the numbers got so bad that we had to limit our event to like 70 people. The space holds 150. But what that also did, though, was I think allowed us to kind of, ultimately it was a positive thing, because then we added a live stream aspect of it, right? And decided, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to, we were already thinking of doing that if COVID was going to wipe out the whole event. But, we ended up doing a hybrid live and live stream, kind of thing. And it actually ended up being really good in a sense that, we were able to kind of reach people that I don't think we would have with just a live event, even at full capacity, right? So, and one of the things we wanted to really use the event for was not just to announce that this culture exhibition was coming, but to really let the community know, like, hey, we want to hear your stories if you were a part of this, scene, or if you had relatives or friends. And I think the live stream part of it really allowed us to reach that audience, because then we had all these people reaching out to us, and I think since then we've done about 36 interviews, and so it ended up actually being a really good thing. But definitely the pivot to that, I mean, they were just, it was just so, you just have to, I think, go with it, right? Because it was almost at a point, it was almost like a day-to-day thing where we weren't sure each day, are we doing this live? Is it a hybrid? Is it, completely virtual? But that's just the reality, I think, of the situation that we're living in these days.
Okay. I think you're absolutely right, Philip. And I love how you made that into a positive experience by pivoting over to having things virtually and live streamed. Drew, do you have an experience that you can share too about how you had to perhaps pivot the programming that you're working with as well?
Yeah, it's quite dizzying to think about where we were like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I was thinking about that. We've just launched a new center in partnership with Cheech Marin and the city of Riverside. And I was thinking, like, we've only been open to the public, the Riverside Art Museum, for like a little more than a year. So thinking back, I do have to say I agree with Philip. I think that ultimately it was really positive for us. We were thinking about, what is our national footprint, particularly because of where Cheech's collection has been. And so we were able to work with like community partners, and we invented a series and dialogos. We like made, it was a fundraising event. Like we made good money with talks. But what was really exciting, it did create a sense of community coming together. And it wasn't just people in Riverside, it was people across Southern California, in Texas. And it was really something we all looked forward to, almost like our own custom TV programming, just to see, each other's faces. So it was good. I was thinking a lot about, relationship with stakeholders and public elected officials during this time. And the importance of relationships at that time, and proactively communicating with them and giving them updates like, okay, this is what we're doing now. This is what's coming down the pipeline. We actually were able to pass a very massive management agreement for our new center during the pandemic. And I think a lot of that was by proactively communicating to our stakeholders. And, during that crisis moment, I think people more than ever were trying to outreach to one another and listen and be of service. And I think ultimately a messaging that we came up with was, the arts are key to Riverside's recovery, economic recovery. And that was something that we repeated quite a bit. And we tried to keep everyone focused on the future and the positive and where we wanted to be, not where we were at that moment. So yeah, those are just some things we experienced.
Thank you so much, Drew. Holly, do you have anything you'd like to share too about how you perhaps had to pivot and how programming changed? Sure. And how, you had to sort of kind of do it all, right? As you tried to communicate everything that was going on during a crazy time.
And I like
unprecedented time.
So I'm going to backtrack and say that I have dark hair, pulled back, red glasses, dangling earrings, and a black jacket with an orange shirt. and I'm in my living room. Yes, we were one of the few sites in Oakland that offered on-site youth programming the first summer after the lockdown. It was very difficult, a lot of conflict about it among staff and debate, but the community was seemingly so desperate to have the programming happening for the kids that we decided to do it with ultra strict protocol and lots of new equipment, and which was enabled by ARPA funds and so on. So that was really fantastic. It was a much smaller program than usual, but it happened. And that then we went on and actually canceled our museum open hours and the school field trips program until early this year. And we were going to open in January. And like Philip, we decided we couldn't open the museum again. But we did finally open for our first big festival in April. And it was jubilation because the community was so happy to be together again. It was one of our biggest events, which is Cambodia New Year, which we have every single year now for 10 years. And it was, thousands of people, very jubilant is the word. People were so happy to be together again. And then we had another big festival in June for the Mayan Mum community, a very, very special festival. And again, it just had that feeling like people were ecstatic to be there together again. We had online stuff, during the lockdown, some lecture series and things like that. And so we continued. And we also, our big pivot was that we began a free food program because Fruitvale is a very low-income community and people were really desperate. And so we've continued that now, even though the lockdown is over, and it's become a very important program. And we're thinking of how to turn it into a humanities project where we collect the stories of the people who come to the food program. And the other thing was we did an all school year learning hub for Oakland's neediest kids, those who were homeless or in foster care who had no internet at home. And that was very gratifying because we had 2 hours a day of online lessons and then 2 or 3 hours of other activities, which we could offer tremendous enrichment, both outdoor and humanities, history, art, things like that. So
Great.
That's what we did. Yeah.
Those are excellent examples of how you had to be really nimble and shift your strategies around. Karina, I'm going to call on you now to see if, can you share some of your challenges and different ways that you had to shift your communications and outreach as, working in a public library? I can only imagine that that was a bit of a challenge.
Right. Yeah. So I received the Library Innovation Lab grant in 2019. So I didn't have to do the Marigold series during a pandemic, which I'm kind of glad about. But if I was in that case, I think we would have gone virtual. But one challenge we did have when we did have the Marigold series is just drawing attention to one of the events. So the Diwali celebration, I wasn't worried at all. Thankfully, our South Asian community are very heavy library users. So we knew we had an audience for that. It was for Day of the Dead that I was a little nervous about trying to, we've been working for years trying to get the Spanish speaking community into our building. So we decided to take this program to them. So it's kind of like to North Sunnyvale. So I partnered with the Sunnyvale School District to host us in one of their schools in North Sunnyvale. So I was really nervous about that because our regular library users, it's quite a drive to North Sunnyvale. So I didn't know if they were going to support us out there. But we went ahead and just went with it. And So it took a lot more promoting and advertising and outreach. I partnered with the school district, so we did outreach through all of the schools. I partnered with organizations out in North Sunnyvale, like First Five. So we promoted through that outlet as well, and also a lot of in-person outreach. I had the opportunity to just pop up at a park and talk to people and really introduce myself. And luckily I'm bilingual, Spanish and English. So it was a really pleasant time to be able to communicate with them in Spanish.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like you also did some really great outreach with legislators as well. I'm going to have Kirsten Vega pop on. She has a tweet from the Sunnyvale mayor that she just wants to share. And it's in the. This is a great example.
Wonderful.
This is what you want, right? This is what we all want. So, Karina, how did you engage with your legislators, with the mayor's office and other elected officials?
You know, this was unplanned for. It's a funny story because in one of our planning sessions, one of our team members was like, what about if we just reach out to Congressman Ro Khanna? He's from the 17th Congressional District of Silicon Valley. And we were like, okay, let's do it. We didn't hear anything. We assumed, okay, nothing. But the day before the Diwali celebration, we hear he wasn't able to show up, but his office was showing up, and they were gonna award us with a certificate of recognition for the Diwali celebration. And so, wow, we were thrilled, we were excited, nervous, and then the mayor shows up as well to both Diwali and Day of the Dead celebrations. And so we received a lot of support. And then as I'm preparing for this discussion panel, one of my biggest regrets now is not asking how they heard of the program, because that would have given me like a sense of what I did right and where I should continue reaching out to. But our program information did go in the city manager's e-newsletter. So I'm assuming that's where everything kind of happened and they found out. So yeah, it was, an accident, and we're happy they showed up, and we were thrilled for the support. And then the Day of the Dead, I see that on Facebook, and it's like, oh my gosh. And also the mayor personally emailed me congratulating me for both events. So it was great.
Oh, that's excellent. You definitely did something right. And sometimes, again, just that simple, clear message is what you really need to get across. Yeah. Again, this kind of goes back to that clear, concise, consistent messaging, that if you have social media at your fingertips, sometimes that's a really quick and easy way to put it out there. Philip, I'm going to call on you. Do you have any stories or experiences dealing with legislators or legislative audience?
Yeah, I think it all, again, comes back to kind of your partnerships and the different organizations you work with. So, a lot of that, I was fortunate in this case that a lot of that came from JANM, from the museum itself, because they are a national museum and have a network, including on their board, very prominent Japanese Americans from all walks of life, including politics. So the way the car exhibition idea actually started was one of the companies I work for, Yam Yam F, is an Asian American centric arts organization that was founded by Justin Lin, who directed the Fast and Furious movies, among other things. And so we had already been talking to the museum about like, hey, we had collaborated on smaller events, but is there something bigger that we can do together? And one day we were visited in our office by Norm Mineta and other representatives from the museum. And Norm Mineta is, he recently passed away, a few months ago, but he was the former Secretary of State and a congressman as well here in California. And basically Norm was the president of the board at the time of the museum. And so it really just makes things a lot easier, again, when you have an organization like that you're partnering up with, which is probably something we would have not been able to kind of do as easily on our own, because Norm himself was, hey, what do you want to do? Like, what are you interested in? And, Justin came up with this car exhibition idea because we knew there was this history of kind of Japanese American Nikkei car culture that predated even World War II up until today, and really was the inspiration for the Fast and Furious movies, like, like the car scene in the 80s and 90s. So yes, so I guess my advice is partner up with other organizations, with other individuals in the community that already have these relationships and are already kind of connected, kind of to things that you're not directly.
Philip, that's great advice. Thank you. Again, those connections and partnerships and maintaining those relationships. Drew, I know you've done a lot with partnerships at the Riverside Art Museum and with your projects that you've worked on. Do you have any stories to share about, work with legislators?
Yeah, I would just recommend again to what Philip said, the board of trustees, your board contacts, that board members are peers to many elected officials, have been working alongside them for many, many years, and are personally connected to them. Our incoming president, Ofelia Valdez-Yeager, very close with Assemblymember Jose Medina. Assemblymember Jose Medina became an amazing champion for the Cheech Project, bringing along, his peers. The other thing I want to say too, I think when I was new as a young museum person, I always thought, oh, they're not going to come to my event, or they're not interested. They're so busy. But they are interested, and they have offices. Council members have offices. Assembly members, senators all have legislative offices with staffers that are there to be at your event, to give a report to the electeds. So I think it's really important that you send those invitations, that you ask a board member to personally invite an elected individual. I think it's really important too to not just think, well, I emailed it. I don't know if you've got their number, just text them a quick reminder, like, hey, would love to see you. I think everybody likes to get a message that they're remembered, right? And to just keep repeating. I also, recommend joining a Chambers of Commerce or local leadership academy, or your Riverside, like an arts day through the California Arts Council. They often will do visits to the offices of electeds, and it's always really lovely. You can talk to them, and you can meet with them. So I just highly recommend being really ambitious with outreaching to the electeds, and keep, I know this is dorky, but keep an Excel list of their names, and when you outreach to them, and if they came, and if you can follow up with them. And ask for that meeting, invite a board member, and then, make sure that you're prepared, that you have a defined ask for them. We would like you to come to our spring event and meet our new staff, or, see what we've done, and listen to them as well. They're on the front lines, and they often can tell you what constituents are worried about, what constituents are interested in. And that often can help shape relevant exhibition programming, circling back to what Holly was saying about how the importance of making sure that your programming is interesting and something timely that people would want to visit. And then just to circle back with Philip, again, community partnerships with organizations that are doing grassroots work, or doing work with electeds, they're also great partners to outreach to them. So those are just some things we've learned.
Absolutely. Thank you, Drew. You're so right that the elected officials are there to help you, and they won't know unless you reach out to them. Holly, do you have any tips on how to engage with a legislative audience?
Well, I made it my business to meet one-on-one with every single member of Oakland City Council, and it was so hard to get the scheduling and so on. But once you got there, like you've all said, keep it really brief, really clear, ultra short bulleted list written to back you up, and then also appear regularly at open forum. And in Oakland, there's an open forum at the beginning of every council meeting, and it's 15 minutes where you can schedule. And I now have the scheduling of that taped. I know how I can get in the first 15, so I don't have to wait to the end of the council meeting. And it's just really great to be there in person. And not only you, but your constituents, like to take youth from our youth program with me, or someone from the Anza National Trail that's one of our partners, in their Smokey the Bear hat, to sort of, oh wow, look, Peralta Hacienda is partnering with National Park Service. But just that physical presence with the legislators is so important, and they love it, they appreciate it. And the result of my work, and then as you just said, assiduously following up on initial invitations. And for instance, for Undocumented Heart, Libby Schaff came, and she hadn't sent notice that she was coming, but I had asked her, and she came and she made a wonderful, incredible, full-throated speech about how wonderful this project was. And ever since then, I've noticed her attitude towards us and towards the projects we do in general has changed.
Great advice. And like you said, again, it's important to be brief and to circle back and follow up. In my work with councils legislatively, I always keep my congressional delegation and state legislators on all of my press lists and follow-up lists, and always send them an invitation and keep that door open and email them and be in touch, because you'll be surprised. Sometimes, like what's happening with Karina, they will tweet about you, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to shift a little bit over to talk about audience and different ways and different messaging strategies that you might have for reaching your diverse audiences in your communities. I know that California is so vast and wide, and there's so many different communities within even one community, right? How do you go about reaching those diverse communities? Karina, can I start with you?
Yeah. So I do a lot of outreach for Sunnyvale Public Library, and I partner with a lot of community organizations. And by partnering, that kind of already builds to your audience. Because when a program comes up or an event comes up, you can outreach or send out flyers through those outlets and then get a diverse community. So that's what I try to do for a lot of our programs here at Sunnyvale Public Library. So reach out and partner with a lot of organizations. I'm sure everyone will be happy to have you as a partner.
Great. How about you, Holly?
Well, one sort of unusual example is our relationship with the Mayan Mom community. Many of them some don't read, others do. But we did a lot of outreach for our Mayan Mom Festival, which was extremely well attended, was through the Mayan Mom radio station. So it was doing Facebook sort of like broadcasts in Mom. And we also partner with a coalition called Resilient Fruitvale, which is 17 organizations who are working for Fruitvale recovery. And one of them is called El Tímpano, which is a media organization that specializes in mom outreach. So we really focused on that event, on the mom community, as well as the general public. But it was very successful, and it was really, really worth it. We do everything in Spanish and English. And for some of our programs, we also do Vietnamese and Chinese.
Awesome. That's great. Philip, how about you?
Yeah, for this event, I mean, when we actually do the exhibition at the museum, we obviously want to reach as broad an audience as possible. But for the panel, we really wanted to focus on, finding Japanese Americans who were a part of the scene, knew about it, as well as general car enthusiasts as well, right? One of the things, that really kind of ended up working out well is there's a lot of, if you look up a lot of subgroups on the internet, on social media, that have an interest in that subject, right? So we found, for example, a Nisei car group that was on Facebook. And there were only like 200, it was a private group. There were only like 200 people on there. But, once I got invited into the group, I mean, they just are so engaged with each other, right? Even that community, everyone knows each other. Everyone kind of is interested in the same thing. And so when someone posts something, you have like, 200 responses and back and forth and stuff like that. And a lot of our audience actually came from, kind of really trying to tap into, a group like that, right? Where, again, it's not a huge group, but they're just really engaged in that topic. And then obviously we had the museum's resources, they have their audience, they have their mailing list, they have, their patrons, same with Nisei Week as well. So between the three of them, I think it was just really just hyper focusing on, like who are the partners, who are the people that we can work with, that really are tied into that audience. And then the one thing that I did want to do kind of on a very broad general level is, could we get some sort of coverage that also did extend beyond that? And so just to get really hyper specific, like here in LA, and I think this is probably true other places, Spectrum is like one of the cable providers, and they started their Spectrum One News series here in LA, I think a few years ago. And basically it's just a regular news show that they do during the day. So if you have Spectrum, you turn on your Spectrum and it's the first thing, it's the homepage that shows up, right? And I knew from people I knew who were involved that their journalists, like they were just under an enormous amount of pressure to find cultural stories, that are very hyper local, related to the community. So it was just a matter of doing research and going like, who's the right person there who's doing stuff about either like, the Asian or Japanese American community or about cars, and, finding that right person. And if you can kind of do that in something kind of very specific like that, I guarantee you they're so happy to find the stories, because again, they're under an enormous amount of pressure to like have a certain amount of stories every week and to find different things. And so that ended up working really well, where, the reporter came and profiled one of our panelists and drove around in his car and went to his garage and all of that. So just really like, I think there's a way to kind of use I think the local media is really going to be like the most important thing, right? Like really, if you can find the right angle and give them, kind of what they need or what they're looking for, it's, that's something that I think, we should not, kind of think like, oh, like, I don't know if they're going to come cover our small event or whatever. Yeah.
Absolutely. You'd be surprised. A lot of times focusing in and doing a targeted media release or even targeted emails or an e-blast targeted toward a specific audience really can just let people know that had no idea. When I worked at the Minnesota Humanities Center, we were always trying to reach the Somali community. There was a very large growing community around the Twin Cities, and we were based in St. Paul. And we just couldn't reach them. And it was always a struggle. What we ended up doing was working with the elders of the community. The community didn't necessarily trust a bunch of, Midwestern Minnesotans coming in and trying to, do a program with them. But if we talked to the elders and explained it to them, and then we actually did events in their community center and in their, where they lived in their neighborhoods, went to their markets and things like that, and brought in people from their community and helped them tell their story. And they then in turn would tell their story to their community. Anyway, it's all circular. I think someone said that before, but it's also local. Drew, how about you?
Yeah, I'm really reflecting about, you want to have general awareness of your program, and then you want to actually recruit specific participants who may, turn on the Zoom on their computer, park their car, pay the meter, figure out where they go in and open the door, so that it's an array of sort of what you want from folks. I will say for general awareness, Philip, Spectrum News One, that's a great tip. They've got solid reporters. They've done some features on our programs here at the museum, really incredible. And there's often a grant opportunity as well, so that you can get additional support. But I think that's a really great idea about Spectrum News One. Every time you turn your TV on, it's the first thing you see. And I've also in Riverside, we have a smaller media outlet. Certainly the Chichas really broadened us across the nation. But for many years working with the Riverside Art Museum, just the importance of your friendship with the local reporter, the person that covers City Hall, the person that does the arts, be responsive if they need a quote, respond to them quickly. I think so much with what we do is just basic relationships, just be that person who's responsive. And also to what Holly said again about the programming, I think our public, programs, they're about stories of people that are usually fascinating. And so, as Philip said, if you can just find out the reporter who's interested in that human angle story, they will do something, be interested. But I think for program participants and working into diverse audiences, Christy, to really reflect on what you said, I think it's so important to be working with leaders from the community you'd like to outreach to. Are they on your board, your advisory committee? Are you partnering with organizations that serve those communities? Are you listening and learning from them? Do you have their endorsement? Are they willing to personally vouch for your program? Are you in service to these communities? Are you listening? It's humility to be a guest in their community. And I think it's important to demonstrate sort of a long-term commitment to want to serve them. So those are just some things that came to me as you all were sharing your experiences.
Wonderful. Thank you, Drew. We're getting close to the end of our hour here, so I'm just going to open this up to some of the questions that are in the Q&A. And I'm going to just start off the top here. Organizations expect humanities scholars to do everything. Fundraising, publications, marketing, I think we're all familiar with that. But we're only humans, right? We can't do everything. And I'm opening this up to the group, what do you recommend we do to maximize the impact of our work when we are already doing too much? Anybody quickly have any?
I'll jump in there.
How to maximize the impact?
You can't do it all. You'll be exhausted. And so you have to call upon boards, advisory committees. Board members want to help. They're excellent resources. They know so many folks. I think sometimes if we can get really organized with a communication toolkit, this is the elevator speech. These are things you can share on social media that can help amplify. But I do think there is tremendous pressure on everyone in public history to do it all. So don't do it all and ask for help by someone who works too much and doesn't ask for help enough.
Absolutely. Rely on your partners and your board, right?
Yeah, and that's why, just going back, I think that's why it's important to develop these relationships with other groups in the community. Like, I don't think, even if, I wanted to produce our car event, the panel by myself, like, it would have been just much harder without having the museum as a partner, because they had the facility where we can take place. They had the media department that could create the live stream, and kind of run that. They already had their mailing list and their kind of PR marketing, kind of infrastructure in place, so that even if we weren't able to do any of that on our own, we knew that there was a base that they were going to help us with, right? That they had these resources and a staff that's already trained to do all this and to kind of, take some of the burden off. So again, I just really want to emphasize this, really finding, kind of those partners in the community that you can collaborate with.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to get at all the questions here if we can. I find this is another one about social media. I often find social media to be most helpful for connecting with an existing audience. How do you make sure you are also able to reach out to a new audience? Anybody have any tips?
I can take this one.
Great.
So how I mentioned earlier, just promoting via different outlets, creating partnerships to reach their audiences. So reach out to your school district, to decision makers. How I mentioned, I reached out to the city mayor and our program information went on his e-newsletter. So all of these, potential partners do have communication outlets that you can also use to reach a different audience that maybe your own social media isn't.
Thank you. We have,
May I add one very quick thing?
yes,
Neighborhood listservs are really great, actually, too. We found.
yes, absolutely. We have a question here about a genealogy library. What are some ways our genealogy library can get ideas for events that community members would like? For example, consult with local public libraries or others. And then, sorry.
What was the question exactly? Sorry.
That's okay. What are some ways our genealogy library can get ideas for events that community members would like? Just different ways of outreach and maybe connecting with other local public libraries. Other ways to connect.
I can answer that. Our history museum, I think all the time that it would be fantastic to connect with the genealogy organization, because we have a lot of genealogy in our one room of our exhibits, and it would be really neat to enlist people's own interest in their own stories to link with interest in the museum. So I would love it if a genealogy organization approached us to do an event and we would brainstorm and think up something great.
Okay, final question, I'm tossing it out. In what ways do you use your websites to promote events and other programs about your organizations? How do you use your websites?
We put wonderful slideshows on them. Miguel Lopez, the marketing colleague of mine, almost every event has a fantastic slideshow that immediately grabs attention. So that's one way.
Anybody else? Any ideas? What we've done in the past is, like Holly said, having a really good interactive slideshow with your web slider. Also making sure that your social media feeds link back to your website. You can have, your live social media. If you do a tweet, it's going to show up right on your homepage and it'll stay there until your next tweet. So that's kind of a nice way to promote not only your website, but also social media. You can also have, as part of your main directory at the top, like your resources. You can also have a press room that lists your press things. You can also list your calendar events on there as well. And also be sure that you update it and that you have somebody looking at it to make sure that the links aren't dead and that when someone clicks on something, it's going to the right place. It sounds silly and obvious, but it happens more than you think. Anybody else want to chime in on that before we close?
I was just going to say, yeah, have correct and accurate information and easily to follow Zoom links. Because I think that's what's so frustrating for someone is they see you on social media and then they go to your website, they can't easily find it or have correct information. So it sounds really simple, but just make sure accurate information is on there.
Okay, thank you, Drew. And again, I think bottom line, those connections, relationships, clear, concise, consistent communication. I'm going to turn it over to Kirsten, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Christy. Hi, everyone. I'm Kirsten Vega. I work with California Humanities on this event series, and we just want to say thank you so much to Christy Shortridge for moderating today, to our panelists for all of this really wonderful and practical advice for how to go about increasing your visibility. We hope that what's been shared in today's session is helpful to all of you and possibly might be inspirational for you to start thinking about applying for grants at California Humanities. So just a reminder, you can always find information about our grant programs, including the California Documentary Project, Library Innovation Lab, Humanities for All Quick and Project Grants. On our website, we have multiple deadlines every year, so check those out, as well as our calendar of webinars for first-time and returning grant applicants. I'd like to close just by thanking once again our wonderful panelists for so generously sharing their experiences and their insights tonight, and to our moderator, Christy Shortridge, for facilitating the session and bringing her own deep knowledge of the public humanities media landscape to this discussion. Many thanks also to our president, Julie Fry, and our program staff, particularly Felicia Kelly, who organizes this series, and for everyone on our team who has helped promote and make this series possible. Tonight is the last event, So we just want to express our gratitude one more time for our funder, the American Rescue Plan, which was supported by the National Endowment for the Humanities to promote recovery from COVID-19. So this has been a great series. We will be sending around an e-announcement with some videos from the programs this year. We hope they can be a continued resource to our community. So thank you all again. Please stay in touch, and we'll be in touch soon with the video. Thank you. Good night.
Bye. Thank you.